One of the hardest questions to answer with comics is a very basic one. Where do I begin? With so many endless series and years of continuity, finding a starting point can be difficult, but that's where this series comes in. Each week I look at all the new series coming out, pick out ongoing series starting new arcs, notable number ones, and graphic novels and trades being released. Then I finish things up by picking out my pick of the week, the thing I'm most excited about coming out this week. To start things off this week, let's look at ongoing series starting new arcs. We're going to start this week by looking at Spawn issue number 318, and this is a major starting point because this is going to be the starting place for entire new line of Spawn books, including Spawn Universal and other titles will be coming out later this month. This is designed to be a brand new launching point for this new era of Spawn. It is kind of cool seeing that Spawn, despite the fact it's been around since the 90s, is still getting new life. I feel like it's just as popular as it's been in quite some time. After issue number 300, I feel like it got a lot of new eyes on it, and because of that, Todd McFarlane, being Todd McFarlane, wanted to strike when the iron is hot, and he's doing so by launching an entire new line of Spawn books. I'll say, as someone, I've always tried to get into Spawn, but I've found it very difficult. It just never really clicked with me. I'm going to try this issue because it is this new launching point to see, is this in time that I could actually get into the character? And you got to respect the fact that it's still only $2.99. I think the only book out there that's a full issue that is that price. So if you're a huge Spawn fan, or maybe you were a Spawn fan many years ago and you're looking to get back into the title, this issue is a great starting point. Speaking of Spawn, we have Killadelphia issue number 13. And I say speaking of Spawn because Jason John Alexander, who is the artist on this book, also did work for Spawn back in the day. And this is written by Rodney Barnes. And I've been actually really liking Killadelphia. And it's taking this idea of vampires. And I know people are, what, more vampire stories? Yes, more vampire stories. And linked it to the Founding Fathers, of course, being located in Philadelphia. And I've enjoyed the expansive look at the lore. It's had one of my favorite characters. You have this one character that was the slave of a founding father and learning his story. And although he's a villain, he's a very sympathetic villain. And I really love that about the last arc. And the last arc, I think, really did a lot to expand the world of Killadelphia. So I'm curious how it's going to move things forward. And it's just a good meshing of historical fiction with Gothic horror, and it all looks fantastic with work by Jason Shawn Alexander. So if you do like Spawn, I think Killadelphia is probably a good series for you. It has a similar tone, a similar era to that title, and of course very much in the horror genre. So excited that it's coming back. It's been some time since we got an issue of this series, and happy to get another issue this week. Coming out this week, we have The Other History of the DC Universe number 4, and each installment of this series has focused on different characters. We had focused on Black Lightning, for example, and this issue is focusing on Renee Montoya, who, of course, eventually becomes the new Question. As a fan of the Gotham Central series, I was a big fan of her character because she played a central role in that and the evolution of that character eventually becoming the Question. And I think the last time we saw her was in the Lois Lane book. So I'm excited to see this series take on that character and expand upon her history. The cool thing about each of these books is that even if you've not read any of the past issues, they've all been self-contained, so you can pick this up without reading anything else. And of course, I don't think it necessarily ties into really the continuity of DC Universe. A lot of them do tie into like real life events, and just seeing this perspective, especially of minority characters within the DC world. This is written by John Ridley, who of course has been writing a lot of the next Batman stuff, and was just recently announced he'll be taking over Black Panther after Ta-Nehisi Coates. Most famously, John Ridley also wrote the script for 12 Years a Slave, and now is working his way into comics, now first with DC, now with Marvel. But I still think the best thing he has done in all of comics has been this series. It's more of a comics prose type of style where you have one still image and text on one page, so you don't necessarily have the format of a typical comic with a 6 or 9 panel grid or something like that. So I feel like it has fit his mold a little bit more, especially coming as a screenwriter. I think the adapting his style for comics has been much more fitting for this book. So even if you've not loved some of his other stuff, I do think this is worth your time because it's, I think, where he's been able to shine and really delve into what makes him a good writer the most. Also coming back this week is Descender with issue number 15. This, of course, is written by Jeff Lemire with art by Dustin Nguyen. And as a big fan of the Ascender series, when they announced the Ascender series, I was excited, apprehensive, a little bit of both. And where Ascender was more in your science fiction vein, almost like Artificial Intelligence, the movie by Steven Spielberg and Kubrick, made into a comic book. This has been more within the fantasy genre, although still dealing with science fiction and kind of a meshing of both those genres, where this has been a world without technology, mostly focused on magic, but that has evolved throughout, taking place in the future of the Ascender book. If you've not read Ascender, would you like the Ascender? Would you be able to follow it? I think so, although I think there have been a number of characters that have shown up, and especially like the Driller, for example, that if you don't have the context of where he comes from, that his appearance may not have the same level of impact. I do think this is best enjoyed by reading both series, but I don't think it's impossible to read Ascender without reading this book. This has been out since October of last year, so now it's finally coming back, and it's designed to be a new launching point. Will it be super welcoming, considering the amount of lore that's been built up in this world? I'm not sure. I have not read this issue yet, but I'd be a little bit hesitant to jump in at this moment in time. If you have enjoyed Ascender, I think you will enjoy this. It's very similar in tone and style, and you have beautiful Dustin Nguyen art. Love seeing him take on these different worlds. And if you're interested in it, a lot of the trades are out right now, so you can catch up relatively quickly and then pick up this issue. And if you have been following the series and wondering when it's coming back, do know you'll get a new issue this week. Haha number 5 also comes out this week. This series is fantastic for doing this video because each issue, it's an own thing. So technically each issue is the beginning of a new arc. What's really exciting about this book is the fact that Gabriel Walta will be on art duties, and a huge fan of his art. The last time I saw him do anything was with the Barbarian Red Planet earlier in the year, and that still remains one of my favorite books in large part due to his art style and his storytelling. Now seeing it in the world of Haha, and I think it does make sense because Walta's art, when it comes to tone and melancholy, they're often one and the same. It can also get violent and horrific. Just think about what he did with Vision and the Sentient with Jeff Lemire as well. So he certainly is no rookie when it comes to the world of horror, and now matching up with W. Maxwell Prince. And if you hate clowns, it's a good series to read because it just gives you more reason to hate clowns, although most of these characters have been relatively sympathetic or at least extremely depressing, unlike something like Ice Cream Man, which is generally in the horror genre for the most part. This, I think, is not necessarily, it's more dramatic. It certainly has maybe horror elements per se, but it's not necessarily something that is designed for scares or frightens or anything like that. I think it's more of a tale of empathy in a way, because you end up caring about these characters more so than anything in the trials and tribulations that they go through. And I also have to hand it to W. Maxwell Prince, because not many people can write single issues this complete, this many times, with different artists and different creators. And I think he does do a good job of working with his style to match the artists that he'll be working with, so getting the most out of their art. And if that's the case, this could be one of the best issues of Haha yet, because I think Gabriel Walta is probably one of the best artists that's been on the series thus far. The last ongoing series starting a new arc this week is Money Shot with issue number 11. And Money Shot has been quite the series, and a series full of sex, science, and aliens. What more can you want in a book? The general premise of this is that you have these scientists, these individuals trying to explore space and find ways to fund their science experiments. But of course, we live in a society that doesn't necessarily invest in science the way it should. So the way they get around that is by having sex and filming it with different aliens. And that's been the general premise, and it's expanded beyond that. And this looks like it's bringing in a new character that's going to shake things up a bit. And I do think it's kind of funny, because when you have a book that focuses on sex, people get super uncomfortable. Yet we have so many books that are extremely violent with bloodshed and things like that, but no one seems to kind of bat an eye. I think it just speaks to where we are culturally and things of that nature. So it's also a very different book from Vault. And this is written by Tim Seeley and Sarah Bietti with art by Carolyn Lane. And I've been liking this book. It's one that I feel like it got a lot of attention early on, but did not necessarily continue that attention. I think it definitely deserves to get more eyes on it. And don't be uncomfortable. It's not necessarily a book that is all about exploitation. There's been a lot of books like that that are just those, those cheesecake art books that don't have much story or depth. I don't think that's the case with this book. There is certainly meaning behind it, even if you definitely just look at the premise. Clearly, the social commentary is there. Plus, it's fun and it's funny and it's an enjoyable read. And when you have books across the landscape of comics that tend to be serious and dour or violent, and you want something that is a bit of a reprieve from that, I definitely would advise checking out Money Shot number 11. I mean, even in the title, you kind of get what it's talking about, right? Now we talked about ongoing series starting new arcs, let's look at notable new number ones coming out, starting with Stargirl Spring Break Special number 1. And this is written by Jeff Johns, so no doubt this is inspired by the Stargirl TV show that's out and perhaps coming back for a second season. I don't know. There's so many superhero TV shows anymore. It's hard to keep track of when things are starting and going. I did watch a few episodes of the Stargirl show. I liked it. It was enjoyable. It was fine. And I think I was watching it through my DC app and I eventually didn't continue it, so I just lost access to it. But maybe we'll go back to it one day. But if you do love Stargirl, and I know a lot of people do, you're getting a new issue. And this, of course, is written by Jeff Johns, who who's used to be, I think, a mainstay in DC Comics, but of course now is kind of comes and goes because he's been working mostly with TV and movies, of course, with some controversy there for a multitude of reasons. However, if you want an issue about this character, this is only a one-shot. This is not a continuous series, but I know there's some fans of the character, and luckily the good thing is that you don't have to worry about the next issue being delayed because there is no next issue. But if you want something that is very in the mold of classic Stargirl, you'll probably get it with this book. Also new from DC this week, we have Mr. Miracle, The Source of Freedom, number 1. And no, this is not a continuation of the last Mr. Miracle series, which was done by Tom King and Mitch Gerads. It's a different creative team and a different Mr. Miracle. It's the new Mr. Miracle. And this is done by the same writer who did the series for Future State that was in a couple of the Superman books and kind of popped in that. And that's actually why I'm quite excited about it, because I did really like that ongoing series, that mini series that did show up. It's one of my favorite parts of Future State. One sad part, though, it is a different artist. I can kind of get it. I mean, that art was not your universal style you typically get with DC. Very different than the normal DC house style. But I thought the creativity within it was really good. Generally, though, I thought the story was good. It was a very small scale story, so I'm interested to see how does this go moving forward now that was really focused on one small specific area. When does this take place? Is it related to Future State? DC tends to be a big question mark right now, so I'm not fully sure. The artist Fico Osio, and I apologize if I pronounced that incorrectly, is one I don't have a lot of experience with. Most of the work I see is from books from IDW that I have not personally read, but one thing I do love about comics is potentially getting a new artist to be excited about. But this is a Mr. Miracle character that I don't know much about. I really read the majority of the stuff I read about him was in the Future State book, but that makes me more excited because you don't have to worry about trying to link this to the past Mr. Miracle series. It can be its own thing. And I do love it when DC does allow smaller side characters to get their own books, even if they're only in miniseries, because I feel like that tends to be some of the best things that DC does. And especially with creative teams that are not necessarily named teams as of yet, but giving them freedom, giving them a character that is not super tied to any event or continuity tends to yield good results, and hopefully that'll be the case with this series. Speaking of characters I don't know a lot about, we have Reptil number 1 from Marvel Comics. And this is, again, a creative team I don't have a lot of experience with. And sometimes I'm excited about that. I'm always open to learn about new creators and new writers and things of that nature, because it gives you more people to be excited about in the future. And Reptil is one of those characters I think Marvel has tried to make work at a number of different degrees. And I can kind of get that. Marvel, I think, is very focused on getting characters that can appeal to different types of age groups, and they've been successful with things like Kamala Khan, of course. And now we're seeing the TV show. No doubt they're looking at Reptil as a character that could probably appeal to even a younger age to a lot of kids. I mean, he's like a dinosaur and a kid at the same time. I think that is the dream of a lot of children. As a person with a 6-year-old who loves dinosaurs, I certainly think this would be a character that would catch his eye. And I hear a lot of people say things like, who cares about Reptil? And my thing is, well, that's why you make a book like this. No one cared about Spider-Man until you made a Spider-Man comic. I mean, when Spider-Man came out, the idea of a Spider-Man would probably be as foreign as a character like this. And give it an opportunity. You never know, what can happen. Is this going to be as popular as Spider-Man? I highly doubt it, but something could come out of it. And I at least appreciate the attempt, right? We always talk about how we need new characters, especially characters that are not a new version of an old character, like a new Batman or a new Superman, or something of that nature. And that is what we have here, a character that is unlike any other character that I can think of that's currently popular, and trying to put some attention on that character. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if only the comic can follow through with that. We'll see what happens, but I'm interested in at least appreciating them trying to expand their horizons, both with the audience they're choosing and the types of characters that they're putting in the pages of their comics. Now getting to characters I'm a little bit more familiar with, we have Star Wars: The Weapon of a Jedi #1, and this is part of the Star Wars Adventures line that is done by IDW, and I think a lot of people tend to dismiss the Adventures line because, that's the kids' book, these are only meant for children, and I'd advise not doing that. I think that Star Wars High Republic Adventures line is actually in a lot of ways better than the main book, and some of the adventure books are just really good. I love the Clone Wars book. As a person who loved that show, I felt like it really got the spirit of that, and this focuses on Luke Skywalker shortly after the Death Star is destroyed, and he fights with Red Squadron in his classic X-Wing. And during this, though, he's feeling the pull of the Force. He's learning about the Force, of course, because it's a thing he just learned about that let him become this hero, and you're now seeing kind of a conflict there. So another benefit of this book, too, is the fact that with Star Wars, we have the bounty hunter storyline that's kind of permeating a lot of the books. Even this week, we have Darth Vader and Dr. Aphra, which will be part of that storyline. And sometimes when you have so many connected books, it can be a good thing. Sometimes it can feel, you can be a bit apprehensive because you have so many things you think you might have to read, and it almost feels like a chore keeping up with everything. Then you have a book like the Adventures book, which are very much their own thing. You don't need to read anything else. Maybe you've never read a Star Wars comic before. Maybe you only watched the movies, whatever it may be. And again, it is part of the Adventures line, so it is kid appropriate, but at the end of the day, I feel like Star Wars is designed for kids at the heart of it. So, as a person with a 6-year-old who loves Star Wars, these tends to be the books I go to most. And again, just because it's designed for kids doesn't necessarily mean that it's simple. It just means that it's totally different than some of the other things. Coming from Image Comics this week, we have Made in Korea #1. And this takes place in a future in which becoming a biological parent is no longer the norm, no longer normal. But to help with that, we have Jessie, which is the first true AI system. And Jessie is a system that is growing and learning and going to forever change what the family dynamic looks like. And one would think with a name like Made in Korea, with things like the propaganda of North Korea, that this will have an additional social commentary element to it as well. I've had not, of course, the chance to read it, but I'm certainly curious about it. It'll be a 6-issue miniseries, so you do know that it will be, relatively self-contained. And there's definitely things about this I'm curious about, especially looking at the family dynamic and how it relates to artificial intelligence with this social, political, global dynamic on top of it. So there's a lot of ingredients here that could lead to a good story as well. The creators are ones I don't have a lot of experience with. That's actually kind of a running theme. A lot of new creators doing big books, which is, I think, a good thing. I think, if anything, that comics needs more creators, more people coming in, doing books, and especially when it comes to like monthly issue books. So I'm really interested in this. Just the concept definitely catches my eye, and I think it could lead to something quite good. Coming from Vault Comics this week, we have The Blue Flame #1, and this is a writer I have a lot of experience with, and it's Chris Cantwell, and I've been loving his take on Iron Man. And what's interesting about this being a Vault comic book, it's actually a superhero comic, which is not the norm for Vault Comics. They really delve into the area of superheroes, maybe something that's like superhero adjacent, but I'm interested to see it. And it's about this character called the Blue Flame that is fighting crime in the streets of Milwaukee, but then is called into a greater cause, and there's this global trial where he's trying to save humanity. And seeing what Chris Cantwell has done with the Iron Man mythos within his book, and just how fantastic that run has been, now knowing that he kind of has this ability to write a brand new story that is not linked to anything else, it certainly feels like it has elements of something like Green Lantern to it. I'm not sure. Maybe with the meshing of Iron Man. I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities with this book. It's a Vault comic, so anytime Vault puts out a #1, I'm going to give it a try. More often than not, I end up liking what they do, especially with a writer that has a pretty proven track record with me. Not just Iron Man, but I thought Cantwell did a great job on Doctor Doom as well. When it comes to the artist K. Michael Russell, when I looked at the books that were passed on, was Glitter Bomb, which was a book that I don't remember a lot about, but I remember liking the way it looks. So there's an additional benefit. And when I look at the landscape of all the new #1s that are coming out this week, there's a number I'm excited about, but the one that's on top of my list of the new series is definitely this one, based upon the creative team, the publisher, and the concept, and it has me excited to see what this can do. The last #1 we're going to talk about this week is Redshift #1 from Scout Comics, and this takes place in a future where the humanity's trying to survive on Mars, but that's not working out. And we've seen some books like The Martian or things like that, where you see people going to Mars thinking it might be one of those last bastions for humanity. We see that is not working out, but we need to find a new home. And the person that's doing it, the astronaut that's in charge, is a person that's also scared of space, just to make things more complicated. I've read a lot about this book, and it seems like there's been a lot of research put into this. There's been a lot of comparisons to things like Interstellar, which is a movie I respected more than enjoyed. I think there was a lot in there to appreciate. So not that it's going to be at all the same, but anything that deals with space exploration, anything that I think especially tries to delve into the science of it, has me excited. Again, a situation where I don't know much about the creative team, but the concept and the idea behind it is the biggest reason I'm looking forward to this issue. Now that we talked about new #1s, let's move over to the world of trades and graphic novels, starting first with Crossover Volume 1. And this is a book that has gotten a lot of attention in the world of comic books, basically because it's a comic book about comics run by Donny Cates with art by Jeff Shaw. As a huge fan of God Country, I was really looking forward to this. And I don't think it's been as good as God Country, but it's been a lot of fun. And I'm also just impressed with the machinations of what they had to go through to make this book even exist, with the different characters that have shown up from different publishers and different creators. And of course, you're not going to have Superman on the pages, but I think they've done a good job of at least getting different characters to make the crossover feel actually like a crossover. And I do think the last few issues have been some of the best of the series thus far. It's really getting into high gear. I don't know how long the series tends to go on. I've actually thought it would only go on for a short while, similar to God Country, but based upon the ongoings of the last issue, there's actually a lot of longevity possible for this book, so we shall see. If you're a huge Donny Cates fan, I do think you would probably like this. It's different than something like Venom. I don't necessarily think it's going to hit the sensibilities a lot of people thought it was going to, or it was going to be this big bombastic story. I think mostly it's been generally character focused for the most part. It's been a little messy at times. Sometimes it's just been a little all over the place, but I think it's starting to find its footing right now. I would be interested in kind of reading it in trade and seeing how it reads in that format. But again, it's coming out in trade. If you've been interested in knowing what all the conversation's been about, you now have the chance to find out this week. Also coming out from this week is Zigzag, and this comes from the world of Fantagraphics. And I actually debated about, should I put this here, or should I put it in new #1s, because it's not a full graphic novel, it's more like an oversized one-shot. But considering most people think of Fantagraphics, they think graphic novels, that's why I'm doing it here. And this is by the mind of Will Sweeney. And if the book follows through with just the premise that it explained in the solicit, I am wondering what this book is going to be, because I cannot do the description of this book justice. I'd advise reading it yourself. It deals with this individual that is growing from fungus and becomes this interstellar police officer that's going to different dimensions. It's very weird. It definitely feels like a book that would be published by Fantagraphics. As someone who does love Fantagraphics books more often than not, some are even too weird for me. If I just looked at the cover of this, I looked at the description, I'd be like, yeah, that's probably going to be published by Fantagraphics, those books that tend not to be weird. When I look at the general design of the cover and almost the tone that tends to hit me, the style is very Daniel Klaus type of look to it. I don't know if that's at all what the story is going to be. It was hard just finding preview images of the book itself. So I'm intrigued, though. I think it was successful in making me excited, just because I'm like, what exactly is going to happen in this book. There's a lot of possibilities, especially with it not being a full graphic novel and something that's a little bit on the cheaper end. So if you ever wanted to read Fantagraphics books, and they can be a bit expensive, this will be, a one for you to check out. Of course, Red Room has been getting a lot of acclaim and attention, and this is something that is very different from them. But if you want to see all the different types of flavors that you can get from Fantagraphics, this may be a book you want to check out. Next up, we have Godzilla: Unnatural Disasters hardcover, and this is actually a collection of 3 separate Godzilla stories, most notably Godzilla and Hell. And one thing I'm excited about, actually, I did read Godzilla and Hell because of James Stokoe art, and I'd advise reading it just for that. Maybe, picking this up if you're a huge Godzilla fan, and we've seen so many kaiju things as of late. There's been a lot of kaiju books. There's, of course, had the Godzilla vs. King Kong. If you want more of that, this will be a good collection for you. We have an ongoing Godzilla book right now for IDW, but that's more YA type of style, more kid-friendly. This is very different. These 3 stories aren't necessarily, not that the kids couldn't read them, but they're not necessarily designed for that audience. If you know anything about James Stokoe's art, it's very detailed, very bold, and it looks fantastic, and it really works for something like Godzilla. Right now he's doing The Orphan and the Five Beasts, if you like that book. Of course, very different because that's more in the martial arts vein, where this is your kaiju action. If you are a Godzilla fan, I do think there have been a lot of Godzilla comics, many of them not very good. These to me have been some of the best that I've read. I've not read a huge amount, but really because of James Stokoe is the reason I read it. And there's really very limited to no words on the page, but you really don't need anything because you get everything with his art. The last trade paperback I'm going to talk about this week is Death and Glory. This completes the entire series, and this is written by Rick Remender with art by Ben Gall. And Death and Glory is, I think, one of those books that probably wasn't up there with Rick Remender's best stuff, but it was definitely enjoyable enough, in large part due to Ben Gall's art. He has a sense of really great pacing and motion with his art, especially when we got an issue that was almost like Mad Max, the movie. Huge vehicles going this forever chase. It was crazy and intense, and he did a fantastic job getting that through on the page. And the book itself deals with like the black market and organ donation and having people be abducted and to take their organs and selling them. And there's a lot of undergoings, a lot of big social commentary, knowing it's a Remender book, and also dealing with things like immigration and healthcare, all that, but also in this insane race against time type of storyline. And it's not, like I said, one of Remender's best books. I wouldn't put it up there with something like Deadly Class, to that level. But it was good. It was an enjoyable read. It was a little bit lighter. If you've been enjoying something like Scumbag and want something that maybe has a little more tact to it, that isn't as abrasive and it has a stronger narrative, but it can be kind of funny. Although the humor in here is twisted at times. It can be pretty grotesque. Like I said, we're dealing with things like organs. But I did like it, and I did see what's coming in trade, so I wanted to make people aware of it, because I do know there are tons of Rick Remender fans out there, and especially those that wait for trade. And if you've been waiting for trade on this book, you can now check it out this week. All right, we talked about ongoing series starting new arcs, notable number ones, and trades and graphic novels being released. Now it's time to talk about my pick of the week, the thing I'm most excited about coming out this week. So looking at this week, there really wasn't a book that I was the most excited about right away, right? Sometimes there's those books that, pop out at me like, oh, that's easily my pick of the week. There was, of course, The Blue Flame, which I'm excited about, probably the new series I would put on top of that list. I'm excited about some of the trades and graphic novels as well. But when I looked at the entire list, I kind of broke it down and thinking, if I had the opportunity to read whatever book I wanted to next, like the opportunity to read that right now, which book would I choose? And it was Black Widow with issue number 7. And Black Widow has, I think, been one of Marvel's best books when it first came out. I, like many, was hesitant when I heard it was coming out. You're getting this new series coming out at the same time. Well, the movie is supposed to come out, but as we know, things have happened. And you're thinking, oh, maybe it'll just be a cash grab, just trying to capture the excitement of that. And it makes sense. I mean, comics are a business, as they say. And ultimately, though, when I looked at it, it ended up being a fantastic read. It almost a Twilight Zone-esque look. The art was phenomenal. One of the best looking books. It was one of those books where I'm like, I can't believe we're getting art like this in a Marvel book, especially when it came to the fight sequences, the creativity, the fluidity was all there, and also kind of changed the status quo of the characters in a way. And I love the dynamic between the characters, especially Hawkeye and Winter Soldier. They had great back and forth, and now we're continuing on with this. And what's interesting too is that it went away and came back with issue number 6, but that technically was like almost like a one-shot, and now we're getting more of a complete story arc. So it's a different artist. The artist that did the series when it first came out has not come back yet, which I'm a little worried about. But last issue also looked great as well. Maybe not as good, but at least as consistent. So I think Kelly Compton too is good at least working with editorial, or editorial is good at matching artists that fit her style. And that's been the case so far with Black Widow. So if you're a person like myself that was like, I don't know about Black Widow, she's not had a lot of great series outside of the Mark Waid Koscielny run. This to me is easily, up there with the best Marvel books, best comics books that I've read in the last 2 years, at least the most consistent. It's also just a cool spy story existing in the Marvel universe. Like, if you remove the fact that it's a Marvel book, you kind of forget this exists in the world with superheroes, because yeah, there have been some characters here and there, but it's been generally grounded compared to like something like an Iron Man book or another Hyperion or Avengers or something like that. Very much in that vein. This to me is really Kelly Thompson flexing her muscles as a writer. I liked her stuff before, but I really feel like she's hit another dimension with this series, considering her other Marvel work. So anyways, what are you most excited about this week? Let me know in the comment section down below. If you want to check out what I loved most about last week, check out my top 10 video that was right before this. Also, if you want to listen to this channel but don't have the opportunity to do it in the video form, do know that Comic Concierge is also a podcast. I do port this over there as well, because I know sometimes people just like to download things and don't want to pay for YouTube Premium. I'm there with you. You can also follow me on Twitter at Concierge Comics, or on Instagram at Comic Concierge, and all my stuff is there as well. I do want you to thank you for the time to check out my channel. I know there's a lot of comic book channels out there, so any view, any interaction, I do truly appreciate. Just remember that comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, keep reading.